and heart diseases. So we know from science that emotions arise from brain. We also know from poetry and culture that emotions arise from heart. So what is the connection between brain and heart? It is the autonomic nervous system, and that is activated in emotional stress. Acute stress because of a death of loved one, earthquakes, as well as anger can lead to heart attacks. Now from evolutionary perspective, we know that the response of fight and flight is very important for the survival of all organisms, including human beings. So stress response is a physiological mechanism that allows organisms to counteract potentially damaging stimuli. The activation of sympathetic adrenal system and hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis, or the HP axis, results in secretion of cortisol and catecholamines. And if they are physiologically appropriate, they are extremely useful for maintaining the survival. And the stress which is physiologically useful is called as a eustress, or it is a good stress. Now what is the difference between us and the animal kingdom is that for animals, whenever the stress response is over, there is something like an on or off button. So once the stress response is over, the animals, they forget about everything and they start grazing or whatever activities they are doing. However, for humans, it is not so. Because of our higher brain structures, we are unable to retrieve from that stress response. And if somebody is caught up in a traffic, then the traffic jam, the irritation, the frustration, it leads to a significant irritation and it gets carried away all throughout the day. And because of that, this is, if the stress is exaggerated or if it is prolonged, it is not physiological, it is a bad stress, or it can be called as a distress, and it promotes cardiovascular disease because of various mechanisms. The mechanisms are physiological responses like tachycardia, hypertension, insulin resistance, and promotion of inflammation. And the behavioral responses because of the stress are unhealthy lifestyles like smoking, taking unhealthy diet, sedentary lifestyle, and medication non-adherence. So according to Swami Vivekananda, anything in excess in poison, it applies to stress also. If it is appropriate, then it is physiological. If it is inappropriate, then it is distress. So we all know that heart attack is produced by occlusion of coronary arteries, and which leads to myocardial infarction, and the myocardial infarction will lead to pump dysfunction and all the arrhythmic complications which will lead to death. Now the basic process of atherosclerosis which produces occlusion, it starts in as early as in infancy. The atherosclerosis starts as a fatty streak. It starts as a fatty streak, and with a progression of time and with a progression of risk factor, the plaque, there is a more significant accumulation of cholesterol, there is accumulation of cells, and the plaque severity increases. Now logically thinking, if the plaque is progressing at one point of time, it should become a total occlusion, and that should lead to infarction or whatever event. It can be a stroke if the occlusion is in the CNS arteries, or if it is in the cardiac vessels, then it should lead to myocardial infarction. However, in reality it is not so, because the total occlusion is always a progressive event, and that leads to collateralization. In reality, whatever events like myocardial infarction, they occur because of a non-occlusive plaque which is ulcerating or rupturing, and along with the thrombus formation, which can be occlusive or non-occlusive, will lead to ST elevation infarction or acute coronary syndrome. So it is the disease with the most long-standing natural history. It is an inflammatory disorder, and it starts as early as in infancy with a fatty streak. So what is the mechanism of atherosclerosis? Now if you see here, the plaque, it starts as an accumulation of all the inflammatory cells along with cholesterol in the subintimal layer. If you see on the upper side, there is an intima shown here, the subintimal plaque, and lower down is the media. The smooth muscle cells from this media, they migrate to the intimal plaque, and that leads to an atherosclerosis. So the association between atherosclerosis and inflammation, it is shown in this slide. If you see, inflammation produces reduction in the collagen formation, as well it leads to a destruction of the collagen fibers because of activation of matrix metalloproteinases, and because of these two phenomena, the plaque covering, that is called as an fibrous cap of the plaque, it becomes weak, and on the top of that, the inflammation leads to activation of macrophages and procoagulant material, and because of that, there will be both plaque rupture as well as the thrombus, and that leads to a myocardial infarction. Now whenever any incidence of sudden cardiac death or unexpected MI occurs, there is always a chaos. Like this was the famous incidence, you might be knowing, in 2016, Dr. Dr. Rakesh Sinha, he had a myocardial infarction, he had a sudden death. This incident was quite highlighted in the media. It was because of 2 or 3 reasons. The first thing was he was quite accomplished person. He was a famous gynecologist. He had 2 Guinness records, world records for doing surgical things. However, more important thing was that he was a very well-trained athlete. He had completed marathons for 4 times. But the most surprising thing was that he was preparing for marathon run, and during preparation, when he was practicing, during that time he had a sudden cardiac death. And because of that, it was significantly highlighted in the media, and it was a quite of discussion in all the social media. We will discuss the reasons why this incident has happened. But whenever we talk about sudden cardiac death or unexpected MI, we talk of conventional risk factors. There are 6 modifiable like hypertension, diabetes, and 2 non-modifiable risk factors. However, in approximately 1/4 to 1/3 of the patients, there will not be any risk factor. And in all these patients, we ascribe the risk to the psychosocial stress. So previously it was considered as something theoretical thing, but recent literature has stressed that psychosocial stress is as important or maybe more important than traditional risk factors like hypertension and diabetes. Now, what is the contribution of acute and chronic stress? So whenever there are life-threatening situations like earthquake or maybe a terrorist attack, there always will be precipitation of acute coronary syndromes. So these life-threatening situations, they account for only 5% of the contribution of stress related to cardiac diseases. The majority of the circumstances, it is the chronic stress that is more important. Now if you see this body, this is a body from a mortuary, and if you see his tag on his foot, the name is written as a unknown. So this is unfortunate soul who has died, and he doesn't have any relation or anybody who can claim his body. So the importance is that if somebody is having social contact which is less than 3, the chances of developing myocardial infarction or any kind of a vascular event is 3 to 4 times as compared to the people who are having lots of friends or family members to support them. Now this is picture of Amitabh Bachchan from movie Khaki. So in that movie, and like earlier movies, he was shown as an angry young man. He was having a suppressed hostility, he had a suppressed anger, he was revolting against the injustice, and he was a Robin Hood image. Now as compared to that, if you see this image, this is from Bagban or Silsil or Kabhi Kabhi, he's quite happy in person, he's quite content person. So whatever is on the left side is a type A personality, and whatever is on the right side on the screen is a type B personality. So the importance of these types of personality disorders is that if somebody is having hostility and if somebody is having a suppressed anger, this is a very strong risk factor for developing atherosclerosis and having an event. Now this is a type D personality. If you remember, he was Guru Dutt. He was from famous movies like Pyasa or Chaudhary Ka Chand. He had committed suicide at the age of 38 years because of frustrations in his life. So these people, they are type D personalities or they are distressed personalities. There are 2 pertinent features of this personality. The first thing is their emotions are negative, and secondly they are socially inhibited, meaning that they will not communicate their problems with anybody. So these are the people who will develop heart disease very fast if they are not committing suicide. Now the frustration and distress or disappointments is a part of our daily life. Now even if somebody is superstar like Cristiano Ronaldo, still he will be having moments of despair. And the reaction to that despair will depict whether he will be successful or not. There is something known as rumination, meaning that if somebody is dwelling too long on negative events or their tendency to blame themselves for their problems, then these people, this is the biggest predictor of bad mental health as well as the bad cardiac health. There can be a phenomenon of empty glass also. The people who look at the glass as whatever is empty, they keep on finding the negativities in their life. This is an experimental animal, this is an experimental monkey, and these monkeys were made experimentally depressed by creating a lab environment in such a way that they were having frustrating experiences, and looking at the face of this monkey you are able to tell that this is a depressed monkey. And what they had done, the scientists had done sacrifice of both happy monkeys as well as the depressed monkeys, and what they found was that if the monkey is depressed, there are a lot of atherosclerotic plaques, and if the monkey is happy, then hardly there is any atherosclerotic plaque. So even in lower animals than human or the non-human primates, the importance of stress with heart disease is significant. Now the economic stress, not everybody is fortunate to able to flee from the stresses of daily life. Somebody like Malla can do it. But for ordinary people, this economic stress is considered as the most important stress for developing a heart disease. People who belong to lower socioeconomic strata, they will be having more significant disease, more severe atherosclerosis, they will be presenting quite early in their age, And these are because of lot of things, because of adversity in their earlier life, because of financial problem, the mental stressors, as well they will be having inadequate diet and they will be having lot of bad voices. Now the next stress, chronic stress, is a marital stress. Now you might be knowing this was the most famous marriage that had happened in the last century, marriage of Prince Charles and Lady Diana. It was visualized by millions of people on television. However, we all know what was the fate of this marriage. In that unfortunate incident, Lady Diana died of accident, but the precursor was a marital disharmony. So this very prestigious bond of marriage, it is very helpful in determining the mental as well as the physical health also. The people who are having divorce, or the people who are single people who are not married anytime in their life, the incidence of heart disease is significantly more as compared to happy married couples. And this is an Indian example of an unsuccessful marriage. Benjamin Disraeli was British Prime Minister in 1850s, and he was famous for his quotes, and he had said that any amount of success in public life will not compensate for failure in family life. Now the next important stress is a job related stress. If you look at this picture, this is somebody's office, and if you see, the table is filled with all the electronic gadgets which are required for day-to-day work. However, if you look at his chair, there is an attached commode. So this person is typically workaholic person. He doesn't have any life apart from his work. We have to differentiate workaholic people, which is a compulsive behavior, as opposed to the people who are hard workers. The hard workers will be having significant interest in their social life, but they are hard working just to earn their life or to do something which is contributing to their life. Now the job stress can be because of three reasons. The first thing is freedom, lack of freedom. If there is a high demand and if there is a less self-control, then there is a stress. Secondly, if they feel that if the efforts are unrelated to their rewards, meaning that they are less rewarded in terms of financial rewards or in terms of praise, then they will be having significant stress. And the last thing is a colleague support. So whenever somebody is having a stress, they have to be supported by colleagues. So Napoleon Bonaparte, and in his quotes, once he had said that a soldier will fight long and hard for a bit of colored ribbon. In his sarcastic comment, he doesn't call that colored ribbon as a medal or anything. He calls it as a colored ribbon. This was a sarcastical comment. Now, since when that stress will affect a human body? Now, this is a famous tale from Mahabharata. When Lord Krishna was accompanying his sister Subhadra, and Subhadra was married, she was pregnant at that time. She was carrying Abhimanyu in her womb, and he was telling her the story of Chakravyuha. We all know that because she slept in between, the story was kept unfinished, and because of that, Abhimanyu was not able to break the Chakravyuha. So this story, it is something we can call as a fiction. However, in reality, the stress in mother's womb is also significantly related to that person's health. And this is exemplified from this Netherlands study. In 1944, it was a cold winter. It is called as a black winter of Netherlands in 1944. Germany was devastated by war. There was significant hunger. All the Netherlands was devastated. There was a shortage of food, and all hungry people, they were after food. Now, if you see that unhygienic kind of food retrieval from all the empty vessels, and these people, after 60 years, they were studied in this famous study of 2005. And they found that the people who were born during that time, during that cold winter, when they were in their womb, mother's womb, at the time of their that cold winter or the black winter, these people had significant incidence of heart diseases as compared to people who were born 5 years earlier or 5 years later. Now recently I read, this is one funny degree of intraoperative hemorrhages. So according to this, there are 4 degrees of intraoperative hemorrhages depending on surgeon's frustration. Grade 1, why I involved in this operation. Grade 2, why did I become a surgeon? More frustration. Grade 3, why did I study to become a doctor? And the last level of frustration is why was I born? So the frustration is very common in our day-to-day life, and this is a Buddhist saying that people are not addicted to alcohol or drugs, they are addicted to escaping the reality. So there can be various vices in our life, and the first one is alcohol. So there are 3 things what we should, as a medical professional, should know about alcohol. The first thing is that alcohol is been advertised by a lot of people as heart healthy. So we all know that there are a lot of studies regarding, epidemiological studies regarding alcohol and its effect on cardiovascular health. So whatever the general knowledge is that it is correct. the people who are consuming alcohol in moderation, they will be having least amount of heart disease, even lesser than the people who are drinkers, non-drinkers. So it's like an U-shaped curve. So the heavy drinkers will be at highest level, the lowest will be moderate drinkers, and again the higher side will be in the non-drinkers. So it's a U-shaped curve. However, we have to understand two things. Any guidelines will not recommend alcohol as an antidote for heart disease. This is for the simple reason that alcohol is a toxin and it will produce a lot of problems like liver disease, accidents and suicides. Secondly, there is something known as binge alcoholism, meaning that the person will be non-drinker all throughout the week, and on the weekends he will consume lot of alcohol. So the definition of binge drinking is 5 drinks, standard drinks within 2 hours. So this is considered as a very strong risk factor for developing a stroke at quite a young age. So this binge drinking is unhealthy, and anybody who is drinking more than 14 drinks per week, it is extremely bad for health, because heavy drinking is the strongest risk factor for developing hypertension, meaning that that person's blood pressure is not controlled with more than 3 medications. You have to take the history of alcohol. Now the second vice is smoking. This is a statistics from 2003 from US, in which it has shown that 22% of the US population was smoker, whereas 3% of the doctors were smoker. This is because of the awareness, and because of that the awareness should be a strong point. Now this US smoking has significantly reduced. Now it is 16%. By day it is significantly reducing because of the public awareness. In India, there is no statistics, but it is estimated that more than 50% of our population is addicted to tobacco, especially smokeless tobacco. Tobacco chewing, gutka chewing and snuff is very common. The non-smokers who consider themselves as a non-smoker, but they are potentially passive smokers because their spouse or somebody else is smoking, the incidence of heart disease is 3 times more as compared to people who are not exposed to smoke. So, and especially the diabetics should be very much aware of the smoking, because their disease many times is not feasible even to bypass surgery, because they will be having so extensive disease. So diabetic smoking is the worst thing. So according to WHO statistics from 2002, it is not the hypertension or it is not the cholesterol which is the leading cause of death, it is the tobacco which is the leading cause of death. Now coming to social media, we see a lot of children like this. They are not playing on grounds, but they are busy in looking at internet, or maybe they are active on social media. Now we have to say that Jaane kahan gaye wo din, the people who are not seeing is children who are playing on the playgrounds. Now what we should do for that? We should change something. Maybe that a different kind of upvas is needed, where we have to live one day without any vehicle, without any mobile phones, or without any social media. Now we have discussed some forms of stress. Now what is the mechanism or what is the pathophysiology of stress? Now this article was published in January of 2017, and in this article, in the Lancet, the pathophysiology was described. Now before this article, whatever the evidence of stress and the heart disease was there, it was a conjectural evidence, it was an animal study experimentation. However, from this study, it was a study of 293 people. They were studied with a PET MR, PET CT for detecting the inflammation, the stress levels and the effect on the arterial inflammation. And they found that in this study, sorry, my pointer is not working. If you see in this thing, the stress will lead to activation of amygdala, which is an almond-shaped structure in the temporal bone. And this amygdala activation will do 2 things. Firstly, it will activate the autonomic nervous system. And secondly, it will act on the hemopoietic system. It will produce hematopoietic progenitors, and which will lead to production of monocytes as well as the cytokines. And these cytokines like IL-1, IL-6, they will act on the aortic media, aortic intima, and they will lead to inflammation of the arterial wall, and they will produce atherosclerosis. So whatever we call as an hypothalamic pituitary axis or the HPA axis, they have developed a concept of NHA axis, meaning a neural activation followed by hemopoietic activation followed by arterial inflammation. So it is an NHA activation. And what they had done, if you see the images which are on the left side, these are the images with the people who are having least amount of stress, and on the right hand side, if you see the images, they will be having the highest amount of stress. The first set of images from the brain PET CT, the second is aortic inflammation, and the third one is the vertebrae showing them hemopoietic activity. So if you see the right upper image, there is a significant activation, or the high amygdala activity is seen in the brain, in the amygdala. The second image on the right side shows a significant inflammation in the aorta, and the reason being the third one, the right lower image, it shows there is a significant activity in the hemopoietic system in the bone marrow of vertebrae. So this is the NHA axis, and that leads to activation. So in this study they found that over the period of 5 years, the people who are having maximum stress, they had a maximum amygdala activation, and they had 4 to 5 times more incidence of cardiovascular events, and this was irrespective of whatever risk factors were there. So it was an independent predictor, it was not dependent on any hypertension or diabetes. So what happens at the molecular level? This is another study. If you see, we have to understand something about chromosomes before considering the role of molecular level or role of chromosomes. So if you see, these are helical structures. We all know that it is a double helical structure, and the ends of the chromosomes are tapped by means of a cap. So these are called as telomeres. So the telomeres will be having protective function. So whenever the cell divides, the chromosome divides, and during the division of the cell, approximately 50 to 20 nucleotide bases will be lost. So this loss is prevented by telomeres, which act like a cap, and these telomeres will prevent the loss of chromosomal material, and they will prevent the cell from aging. If cell cycle goes on and if the chromosomal material is lost, either of the two things will happen. Either the cell will become aged, or there will be a senescence of the cell that will lead to apoptosis, which will be a programmed cell death, or it will lead to a pro-inflammatory cell. Now this was understood by conducting an experiment on these mothers. So these are the mothers from San Francisco, California, and these were mothers to two kind of people. The first who were physically handicapped, and the second group of the people were mentally challenged. So these people, they were divided into two groups who were having a social supports, they were forming their network, social network, and those people who were living in isolation. And they found in that study that people who are having a good social support, their telomeres were intact, the cells were not aging, and they were immune to all kind of heart diseases. Whereas those people who were not having any social support, the telomeres, they are either shortened or they were lost, and because of that their cells were inflamed or they were getting aged. And because of this research, these three people, Elizabeth Blackburn, Caroline Greider, and Jack Stojak, they got a Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2009 because of this study, and their paper's article's name was How Chromosomes Are Protected by Telomeres and Telomerase. So once we realize the things that if the stress is because of a very fast pace of our life or modernization or because of a scientific progress, is it something that we cannot change, whether it is a non-modifiable thing and we have to accept this as a curse? The answer is no. We can have a different kind of modalities. We can have a proper diet, proper exercise. We can have emotional stability by means of lot of things like social support. We can develop lot of behavioral changes like love, appreciation, helping others. We can say no to tobacco, alcohol moderation, and we can practice ancient practices like yoga, pranayama, and meditation, and we'll see how it will help. Now the stress buster first is a physical activity. It is recommended that you should walk at least 150 minutes a week. It comes to only 2.5 hours per week, so it comes to around 20 minutes per day. So if you are doing something more intense, then jogging 75 minutes per week is a definition of physical activity. So if you are a busy student, if you are a busy houseman or registrar, you can still jog for 75 minutes on your holidays, and still you can be physically active. The advantage of this thing are twofold. The physically active people, they live approximately 5 years more as compared to physically inactive people. And secondly, and most importantly, the sense of well-being or a euphoria, it is because of the endorphins, which are naturally occurring opioid neurotransmitters in the brain, and that will give you an euphoria. Now, everybody will like to have a body like this, physique like this. Now, these stars, they cannot achieve this by just doing an aerobic exercises. It is not possible to have this kind of a physique with isotonic exercises. This is only possible with weight training. And previously, all the recommendations were of the opinion that we should avoid all kinds of weight training because it is detrimental for cardiovascular health. However, the recent guidelines say that at least twice you should do some kind of a weight training in a week, because it will not be only helpful for achieving your cardiovascular fitness or cardiovascular health, it will be helpful in preventing osteoporosis, especially in postmenopausal females, and it also will prevent the joints diseases as well as the ligament problems later in your life. Now this is a correlation. If you see on the x-axis, there are categories of exercise capacity, and on y-axis it is the relative correlation of a death or cardiovascular death. If you see the people who are most fit, which are the number 5, the rightmost category, the relative risk is 1. And if you see the people who are least fit or physically inactive, the incidence of cardiovascular death, it is 4.5 times. If you look at the moderately active people who are able to walk at the speed of 5 kilometers per hour, still their cardiovascular risk will be 2.5 times. So the fitter the person is, the more active the person is, his cardiovascular health will be very strong. And this is from a very respected journal. This is a paper from NEGM 2002. Now, if anybody is trying to do an intense exercise, it has to be always a graded exercise. If somebody who is unaccustomed to all kind of exercises does a very intense exercise on one day, that is very detrimental, and it is considered as one of the risk factor for developing a plaque rupture or myocardial infarction. So sudden cardiac death can occur in somebody who is doing a marathon running, who is otherwise not walking more than 100 feet or something. So the importance of exercise is not only in the training, it is a gradual training. And the bonus for cardiac disease patient is like this. They can get a natural bypass. If somebody is having already coronary blockages and if he is having a graded physical exercise with a medical supervision, these people will develop a significant collateralization and they will get a symptomatic benefit because of this thing. Now the second stress buster is yoga, pranayam and meditation. Now this picture shows us a tale from Ayurveda. Ayurveda says that any person who is being born in this life will be allocated some kind of breaths. It may be 10 million breaths or 50 million breaths depending on the species. And it is that organism that has to decide how fast he is breathing to consume that amount of breath. So the left side is shown is a dog. He breathes approximately 40 to 50 times or 50 to 60 times in a minute and he lives for 15 years. Whereas the tortoise is the longest living creature. He breathes approximately once or twice in a minute, but he remains alive for 200 to 300 years. So the Ayurvedic people, they say that you do pranayama, you control your breathing and you increase your life expectancy. So whether it is the ancient Ayurveda or the recent medicine, what is saying that. So this is a paper from NEGM 2005, and if you see that the people who are come for exercise test, these were more than 5,000 people and they were followed for 23 years and they found that the resting heart rate was the strongest correlation of a long-term mortality. If you look on the left side or on the y-axis, there is a relative risk of death, and on the x-axis is a resting heart rate. If you look at the left side, it is the heart rate less than 60. The white bars showing the all-cause death, and the greenish blue bar is a sudden cardiac death. If somebody is having a resting heart rate more than 75, the incidence of all-cause death goes by around 2 times, whereas if somebody is having a resting heart rate more than 75, that person dying because of a sudden cardiac death, the incidence is increased to 3 to 4 times. So it is the tranquility which regulates this kind of an heart rate, and maybe it is related to sympathetic neuronal activity, and how it can be manipulated we'll see in the next slide. Now yoga is considered as an ancient Indian tradition. Yoga, pranayama as well as the meditation. It is the gift to the world by Indians, ancient Indians. What it leads is the significant calming of amygdala, activity, which leads to reduction in sympathetic tone and increase in parasympathetic tone, and because of that resting heart rate and resting metabolism can be lowered. Now you might be knowing about Mr. BKS Iyengar, his late Iyengar. He was a very respected and very famous personality. He has received all these awards, Padma Shri and Padma Bhushan. Now, when he was 85 years of age, his age was determined what is his biological age and what is his physiological age. Now, they found that his vascular age was 38 years when he was 85 years of age. Now, this reversal of aging can occur because of yoga and pranayama, probably related to the amygdala activity and probably related to inflammation. Now this lifestyle heart trial is the most famous amongst all the trials which has studied atherosclerosis, stress and everything. So this was published in Lancet 1990 with 1 year's follow-up, and in 1998 with 5 years follow-up. And in this study, this Dean Ornish, who you must have heard about his book Reversal of Heart Disease, in this lifestyle heart trial, 98 people, it was a very small trial, including only 98 people. But the beauty of this trial was that they had done a baseline angiography, and after 1 year and 5 years of their intervention, they had repeat angiographies in 98 people at 1 year and 48 people at the end of 5 years. And they found that people in whom the intervention was done in the form of aerobic exercise, weight reduction, management of stress by means of yoga, pranayama and meditation, and fat-free veg diet along with quitting of smoking, they found that in 82% of the people with an active intervention, they had regression of atherosclerosis. In the control group, there was progression of atherosclerosis. And what they found that the percent reduction in the coronary stenosis was not significant. On the left-hand side is the percent reduction in the coronary stenosis, and on the x-axis is the adherence of the lifestyle modification. If you see in the mostly adhered people, there was a reduction of 6 to 7% in a coronary stenosis. If somebody is having a 75% stenosis, at 5 years it will become 68%. So the change in the stenosis will not be very dramatic. What will be dramatic will be stability of the plaque, and that is the most important thing. Because of change in lifestyle, there will be reduction in inflammation in the vessel wall, and there will be reduction in the chances of plaque rupture, and because of that, the myocardial infarction rates will be significantly reduced. The third stress buster is laughter. You might be remembering this personality from a famous movie, Munna Bhai MBBS. He was a dean of medical college, Dr. Asthana, and he had a funny style of laughing whenever he was having under significant mental stress. Now, this concept is similar to Hasya Yoga. The people, they laugh without any reason, they clap and they laugh. Brain is unable to understand what is a true laughter or genuine laughter versus what is a fake laughter. It will release whatever the form of the laughter is, endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin and dopamine. These are the joy neurotransmitters, and it will improve your mental as well as the physical health. This is a famous example from the literature. He was a famous journalist from USA. He was a normal cousins. He has written a book on anatomy of an illness, and he advocates that laughter is a medicine. Now, this person was a journalist in New York Times, and he was allocated a Russian posting. He was posted in Russia in 1960 when the Cold War is at the level of peak. Now, all the Russians were considering him under the disguise of journalist. He is entering as a CIA spy, and everybody was suspecting him as a traitor. So, there were 2 KGB agents who were after him even if he was entering into toilet. So, he was under significant mental stress. There was no socialization in Russia. There was extremely cold winter. So, when he came back to USA after 2 years of this intense posting, he was significantly exhausted, and he started getting joint pains. So, he was diagnosed of having ankylosing spondylitis. He was taking a handful of tablets during that time. The tablets which were available in 1960s and analgesics were aspirin, paracetamol and codeine, which are very weak tablets. There were no disease modifying agents in that era, and he was significantly suffering. At one point of time, he became bedridden. He was requiring nursing even for taking bath and everything. And at that time, one of his visitors brought him few films. That time CDs were not available, the Tagarnos and spools were available. So he brought some comedy movie films like Charlie Chaplin and Laurel Hardy. And when he saw that movies on one day, he realized that on that day he had not taken a single tablet of any analgesic. So he was thinking what I had done something different from previously, because laughter was not in his mind. After 2 days, he realized that on that day, for the first time in last year or something, he has laughed for a significant amount of time. And then he started something like an Hasya Yoga, and his ankylosing spondylitis got better and better. And ultimately, he had a remission of ankylosing spondylitis. Scientifically speaking, there is significant criticism on this book, whether it was a reactive arthritis or a true remission of an ankylosing spondylitis. But whatever science has proven is that there is a significant relation with the laughter and the disease activity. Now, the social bonding, as we have explained, that it is very essential to have family and friends bonding. Now, we have to develop something like a stress-resistant personality. Now, this picture shows a Malkham, where the person who is on the top is on the shoulders of hundreds of people. So, this is how the society works. Now, just I will tell you a short story of a human species. 30,000 years, from 30,000 to 70,000 years back, there were 5 species of human. We call our species as a Homo sapiens. So there were 5 species of Homo genus. So there were Homo neanderthals, Homo deusens, then Homo erectus. There were 4 or 5 species. But out of that, all species got extinguished over the period of time. Only Homo sapiens, they survived. And they had a lot of fights in between. Homo neanderthals, the one species that I have to mention, was stronger as compared to Homo sapiens. They were equivalently brilliant. The intelligence was same, the brain size was same. In spite of they disappeared in the flow of time. And the scientists ascribe this to the flexible cooperation of human beings. Homo sapiens are not superior because of their intelligence, it is because of a mass scale and flexible cooperation that is very essential for survival, and that is not holding true for prehistoric times, it holds today also. So the people who are able to do a flexible cooperation, they will be successful, and it will act as a lubricant, and they will be stress free also. Now the next thing is helping others. These two famous industrialists, Mr. Ratan Tata and Mr. Narayan Murthy, they out as in separate examples compared to the bunch of other people. They are not greedy like other industrialists. They are people who are having social underprivileged people. They are helping all the people, and helping other people will brought your levels of serotonin, oxytocin and dopamine to a higher level and make you happy and content. Now this is a scientific lecture. I will not go into detail of this slide, but you have to have belief in some higher power that will help you during the time of stress. Now this stress resisting personality hobby also can be something which will be important, and lot of studies have shown that in ICUs where there is a light music, the incidence of people getting better and the amount of stay in the ICU is significantly less as compared to the people who don't have these kind of facilities. So it is not a philosophical thing. It has been proved in scientific literature that music definitely helps. And the last thing is something like diet and weight. Now we are talking about stress. What the stress does is that it increases the production of neuropeptide Y. It is called as a NYP by hypothalamus, and this leads to abdominal fat cells to increase their fat deposits. The person becomes obese because of fat. The second thing is that it produces insulin resistance. Stress produces insulin resistance, and it produces people more fatter. So this is a slide showing that in 1990 the television screens were fatter, whereas the peoples were slimmer. 30 years later, the reverse is the true. So we have to reduce our obesity as a population. So the benefits of 10 kg of weight loss is not only reduction in 20% of mental mortality, but there is a significant improvement in the mental health also. And the last thing, especially for medical students, a lot of people come to us as a practicing people and they ask what specialty I should take. Which is a thing that can work in market after 5 years or 10 years. So rather than this message from 3 Idiots movie, it is aptly applicable for these kind of people. You develop a liking for some specialty and you go in that specialty, whether it is economically successful or not, and you will develop a successful career in whatever specialty you have chosen, provided that it is interesting to you. And just to end, before ending my discussion, I will talk about this book. This is a Sapiens, or it is from an Israeli historian. It is Yuval Noah Harari, a brief history of humankind. And if you read these small letters from Bill Gates, anybody interested in the history and future of humankind should read this book. Now in this book he has recommended that in last 12,000 years after agricultural revolution, there were 3 challenges for human species. The first one was famine, the second one was plague, and the third one was poverty. So amongst all these adversities, human race has conquered all these 3 things because of the progress in the science, progress in the human race. And the last thing that has to be conquered, what is the challenge for the future, is the challenge of death. Now you must be reading, today there was an article in Times of India regarding, you might be knowing that BRCA is a mutation in the female population that increases the chances of getting ovarian and breast cancer. This was first successfully done in India in Jasloke Hospital. You might be knowing that Angelina Jolie, she has removed both of her breasts and ovaries because of the same mutation. So these kind of genetical engineering, it is going to progress and it will become a mainstay of research in the future centuries. And according to this author, humans will not be immortal, but they will be immortal, meaning that people will not be dying because of illnesses. They will be dying only because either it is an homicide or because of accident. So there will not be anything like a disease. They will be immortal. They will be having lifespan maybe of 150 or 200 years after few centuries. This is something like a scientific fiction. Maybe that this may be a fiction today, but till that time, then we do not have to consider like what is physical health and what is mental stress. But till that time, we have to adhere to the simple philosophy of life. We have to lead, if we have to lead a stress-free life, we have to be a good human being. We have to be polite, loving, kind and helping, and maybe that it will add you a bonus of successful life also. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Or comments, I will like to discuss that also.
Thank you, sir. Sir has given a very good overview about the stress. I like to listen this lecture again and again to get the stress relieved. Okay. What I know, 2004 is the stress is the second most cause for the cardiac MI. Okay, and that time internet, all this not grown. Nowadays, I think stress must be number one cause for the myocardial infarction. We are seeing that at the age of 17, 21, we are doing the primaries angioplasty for the young person. Most of the time, one is smoking. Other form, most of the 50% of the young people, they don't have any other risk factor, and only risk factor is a psychological stress. As a doctor, I am going to tell to all the students, I think we are running behind one goal which we cannot achieve in our life. In 10th standard, we are told that this year only you have to study, you will be clear. That is after in 12th, first MBBS, fourth MBBS, MD, post graduation, and then again our career. So that goal is not going to be achieved. Understand? You have to decide what you want in life. You have to balance your career, your family life, your personal life. Understand? So nothing like that. You cannot relieve your stress. Like yoga and all these are available. Okay, but nowadays competition between among us, like you want to score, you want to purchase a car, you want to purchase a hospital, that is going to be there. So you decide what you want in your life and be a stress free and have a healthy life. Thank you.